It is no secret that Georgia football has been insane over the last few years, winning back-to-back national championships and sending what seems like hundreds of players to the NFL. Georgia is truly at an elite level right now, and that also means they can get pretty much any player they want. Whether that's in recruiting or in the transfer portal, the Bulldogs are currently on the top. Despite how great they have been, Georgia has not had an 1,000-yard receiver in quite a long time. Obviously, they have the best tight end in college football in Brock Bowers, but the Bulldogs were looking to upgrade their wide receiver room, and they went and got arguably the best receiver in the transfer portal. Dominic Lovett was a 4-star recruit in high school, was one of the top-graded receivers last year at Missouri, and has the chance to be the next great Georgia Bulldogs weapon. In today's video, I'm going to introduce you to who Dominic Lovett is, or to go through his journey and how he got to this point, his time at Mizzou, and why he has such a high ceiling there. But before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football, and let me know what player, team, topic, or transfer I could cover next. Now, let's get started and talk about Dominic Lovett. So, growing up in Illinois, Dom Lovett had one dream in life: to play Division I football. He was a great athlete and started to work hard at it and quickly developed a good reputation. He would eventually arrive at Belleville West High School on the Illinois side of St. Louis, and a breakout sophomore season there would put him on the recruiting map. He eventually decided to transfer high schools though, and went down the street to his new destination. That destination was East St. Louis High School. They're one of the top powerhouse programs in both the Midwest and in the country, but it's also a pretty dangerous area apparently, and it can be tough. Recently, they've produced some pretty big players, such as former 5-star defensive tackle Terry Beckner Jr. and former Miami Hurricanes receiving star Jeff Thomas. As a junior, Lovett showed he was next up for the East St. Louis Flyers, as in 2019, he caught 74 passes for 1,549 yards and 17 touchdowns. He became a 4-star recruit and one of the top playmakers in the class of 2021. The big schools all wanted him at the time, as he was going to have official visits lined up to Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. They were interested in him, but with everything going on in the world in 2020, recruiting got tough and interest from those schools would dwindle and eventually died. Georgia never stopped talking to him, but they took an in-state kid at his position, and it didn't go anywhere more with Lovett. Except with everything going on in the world, new schools would eventually be in the mix, as he dropped the top 7 of Missouri, Kentucky, Illinois, Louisville, Penn State, LSU, and Arizona State. I'm not sure out of those guys how many of those offers were committable, but he said, quote, "I narrowed it down to the people who stood by me through it all." Lovett admitted he wanted to go far away, to get out of East St. Louis and go to a warm place. He'd end up making that move across the country and chose Arizona State. One scout said, quote, "Because of the late offer, the Sun Devils had no chance to stick with Lovett. Instead, they jumped in during the mucky period, and Lovett says, quote, provided him and his parents the feeling that Arizona State provides a strong family atmosphere. His recruitment went quiet from there, as pretty much every school backed off except Mizzou. Except 2 weeks before signing day, Arizona State would apparently pull his offer, and this would change everything. Lovett declined to say why this ended up happening, but it came down to a personal decision. After that, no more big schools were really interested in him, and he had to find a place last second. The nearby Mizzou Tigers started to look a lot better at this time. He picked Mizzou shortly after because they were selling him the hometown hero thing, and he didn't want to have to keep going through the recruiting process. He also loved their new head coach, Elijah Drinkwitz. He said, quote, "I've been in touch with Coach Drink from the moment I stepped foot on the Mizzou campus. I know he's a family guy, he cares, and he puts everybody in front of him before he thinks about himself." It also helped that his high school quarterback, Tyler Macon, was a 4-star recruit and was also headed to Mizzou. He said, quote, "It's a dream come true. I get to be with my quarterback for another 3 to 4 years." Mizzou also went all out and showed a lot of kindness to the East St. Louis community, as when they arrived in Columbia, they modeled their Mizzou uniforms and helmets with a number 6. That was the number of former East St. Louis phenom Jalen McKenzie, who was fatally shot in May of 2019, and this was a huge national story. The gesture was captured in a photo that quickly went around social media and probably helped Lovett's view on Mizzou. That day, both Lovett and Macon left with scholarship offers, and while Macon committed a few days later, Lovett would eventually join him through a late journey. This was a huge early recruiting win for Coach Drinkwitz in Mizzou's 2021 class. According to 24/7 Sports, Lovett was listed as a 4-star recruit, the number 52 wideout, and the 331st best player in the class of 2021. So, how did he end up doing at Mizzou? Let's take a look. As many of you guys know, I'm a big Mizzou fan, and I think that Lovett's talent was not properly used his freshman year. As a true freshman in 2021, he played a couple of games, with his most notable performance coming against SEMO. In that game, he had 5 catches for 81 yards. He also had a touchdown against Texas A&M, and would end up playing in 9 regular season games. He finished with 24 catches for 169 yards. He'd play a little bit in their loss to Army, and overall, it was just not a great year. He said he was really hard on himself as a freshman and was frustrated with his lack of production. Elijah Drinkwitz said, quote, "Last year, I felt like I tried to do too much too soon with him, moving him around too much, and I didn't really let him develop and settle in. You've got to remember that these young men are 18 years old, and the jump from high school to college is a little bit more than what people expect. So you really have to rely on your techniques and fundamentals." In 2022, Lovett would end up becoming the main option, and he would prove that in his first game. He caught 6 passes for 76 yards against Louisiana Tech, and then had 3 catches for 66 yards in a horrible loss to Kansas State. After that, he'd have his best game of his career. Against Abilene Christian, Lovett would catch 7 passes for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then against Auburn, he'd continue. He caught 5 passes for 102 yards, and even had a late highlight reel level catch, but unfortunately Mizzou missed an easy field goal and then threw the ball through the front of the end zone and lost to Auburn. It was one of the most ridiculous games I've ever seen. Against Georgia, Lovett was cooking as he had 6 passes for 84 yards, but he'd end up getting hurt, and Mizzou would barely lose that game by 4. Lovett would continue on with 4 catches against both Vanderbilt and Florida before another monster game. Against South Carolina, he caught 10 passes for 148 yards as they upset the number 25 Gamecocks. He was limited against Kentucky, had a touchdown against Tennessee, and then would finish the year on a high note with Arkansas. Against the Razorbacks, he caught 6 passes for 130 yards, and this would end up being the final game of his Mizzou career. In 2022, he caught 56 passes for 846 yards and 3 touchdowns. On paper, those numbers don't look great, but when you factor in how bad Mizzou's offense was last year, Lovett was one of the best receivers in college football. He was voted an All-SEC player, PFF ranked him as one of the top wideouts in the country, and pretty much anyone who watched him knew he had a ridiculous amount of potential and skill. To the shock of many Mizzou fans, he would enter the portal just a day after they would beat Arkansas. He eventually decided to transfer to Georgia, and many were critical of his decision, thinking that he used Mizzou as a stepping stone. Recently, he had an interview on YouTube, and according to some people on Power Mizzou, it seemed like this was how Dom was the whole time. He wanted to play on an elite team, and those opportunities were taken away from him in 2020. With the free one-time transfer, he had a chance to go and play for a blue blood school, practice against the best players, maybe win a championship, and have the best chance of getting him to the NFL. Honestly, as a Mizzou fan, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily happy he left the program, but with how bad the Mizzou offense and quarterback situation has been, I don't have a whole lot of faith that it'll get a lot better, and ultimately, I want Dominic to make the NFL, so going to Georgia isn't that bad of an idea. They also need players. Kearis Jackson moved on to the NFL, A.D. Mitchell transferred to Texas, and Dominic Blaylock transferred to Georgia Tech. They needed more playmakers on the perimeter, and now they brought in both him and Ra Thomas, and Lovett has a chance to be the second option on the team right away, behind Brock Bowers. Kirby Smart said, quote, "Dom's been able to make some plays down the field, and I've been very pleased with him. He's been matched up with Tyke Smith and Javon Bullard a lot, and he's made some plays on those guys. I've been really proud of what Dom's been able to pick up." So right now, the rumblings out of Athens are that Lovett has been really good, and hopefully he'll become that second option for Carson Beck this fall. He's going to be playing at some of the best defensive backs in college football every day in practice, is going to get a chance to play in some really big time games, and could be that next 1,000-yard receiver for the Bulldogs. I'm not quite sure if it'll happen, but I think he has a good chance at it, and I think he'll be a high-end NFL draft pick. A lot of Mizzou fans have mixed reactions on how they feel about Lovett, but overall, I like the guy. I'm rooting for him at Georgia, and I can't wait to see what he does next. But what do you guys think? If you're a Georgia fan, what do you think of Dominic Lovett? If you're a Mizzou fan, what do you think of Dominic Lovett? And what transfer should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.